Hello, I'm Peter Blackwood and I am the coordinator of the Uniting Church Icon Schools, and I have prepared this video, this tutorial for the April classes in 2026, and it is about hands painted on icons. Question: what is the Mona Lisa holding in her right hand? Answer: her left hand. The great Renaissance artists were quite good at depicting hands, and perhaps the most famous hand art in Western art is the etching of the praying hands by Albrecht Dürer. Hands are difficult to paint and come under the most frequent criticism by art commentators. Best advice to portrait artists: unless you're really good at it, leave out the hands. Well, Jennifer Kroom was not put off by this advice when she painted Kylie Kwong for the National Art Gallery last year. Hands are difficult to paint, and the stylized hands in orthodox iconography do not make painting them much easier. And so in this tutorial I'm trying to help us avoid some of the common traps. When we learn about depicting the human form, it is worth going back to the basics, right back to the human skeleton. The bones help us appreciate where the bumps are, especially on the bits like hands and skulls that don't have much in the way of bulging muscles. The placement of knuckles, how the web of the fingers don't meet the first joint, how the first joints do line up, albeit in a slight arc, how some of the first knuckles line up with the second knuckle of the little finger, how the second knuckles of pointer and ring fingers line up with the tip of the little finger. Also notice the thumb, unlike the fingers, has only one knuckle. I was prompted to address this topic of painting hands when I saw an article about the meaning of hand postures in iconography, and I'm showing this lineup of the images and descriptions very quickly because I'm skeptical of claims that there is some kind of universal meaning that belongs to features in icons like the placement of the hands. My own take on any meaning that might be attributed to the posture of hands is that hands holding an object indicate the importance of the object, hands pointing to or gesturing to a person or object indicate status of that person or object. Hands held up, palms to the front, are a posture of prayer, very common in icons of Theotokos Orans, that is, the Mother of God at prayer. Apart from these, hands are likely to be Christ or a bishop bestowing blessing. Most are fairly simple, but this convoluted one is common in icons. It does attempt to spell out iota sigma chi sigma, the Greek abbreviation for Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ. I'm told that it is a posture used by some priests and bishops when blessing their congregations, and I would advise against this practice if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, trigger finger or osteoarthritis, and especially if you have all three at the same time. Believe me. A more common position for fingers in a posture of blessing shows 3 digits joined at their tips, leaving the other 2 fingers displayed extended. It seems to me that in Christian art, any composition that deliberately indicates a 3 or a 2 suggests the Holy Trinity and the 2 natures of Christ, that is, human and divine. And it seems to me that 2 fingers and the thumb joined together reminds the worshipper of the unity of God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit, the 3 in 1. So there we have a bit of anatomy and theology. What are some of the practicalities for painting hands? Well, when sketching an icon that includes hands, I remind myself that a hand is about the size of 3/4 of the figure's head. Also, the knuckles, the main ones, form a line about halfway from the wrist to the tip of the middle finger. Well, how might any of this translate into putting pencil to paper?
Now let's measure up 2 squares. One here, and one there. And tink, tink. And let's so we've got an oblong, or really 2 squares, and our hand, the palm of our hand is in here and our fingers are here, and the centre line is kind of this knuckle area here. So we've got, it's going to be slightly off centre because the 2 fingers on this side are slightly smaller than that side. So we've got finger there, and we've got this line that kind of runs through here. It's not straight, but it marks where the fingers come down to. So let's start with the tallest finger. And then come back to the next one. And remember that the little one, the tip, will line up with the joint that's there. So let's mark those joints so the little finger is going to be. And we've got another one here. And the second joint on the little finger is going to line up with those ones. So it's a bit lower, and that's going to be the same as that, and that's going to be a bit higher. So down here there's this next joint here. And then we've got a thumb, which is going to line up kind of midway but here. So let's and we want a bit of a nail in there. Bit of a shape Do that there a bit. And if we take out our guidelines, we have a reasonable proximity of a hand. And these fingers don't look very long and could be elongated by bringing this down to this halfway mark. And in a stylized icon, we could make those fingers a bit longer, but you wouldn't want to do it too much longer. But very often, icon hands have long fingers. So that's our first sketch.
One of the dangers of drawing and painting is that we will often draw what we think is true without looking at what is actually the case. And when I looked at my hand, I noticed that my fingers don't join in a point when I look at the palm side. They're more likely to when I look at the back side. So I thought, rather than do this all over again, I'd make a point by correcting it rather than pretending that I'd made a mistake, that I hadn't made a mistake, which I had. And hey, that looks better.
So let's recap. Firstly, the open hand approximates a rectangle which comprises two squares. And the top of the little finger aligns with the top joint of the index and ring fingers. And the top joint of the little finger aligns with the first joint of the index and ring fingers. And the thumb is a sort of movable fist, but when it is bent, it aligns halfway up the first part of the index finger. If it's flat up against the hand, it will align with the first joint of the next finger.
Well, let's see what happens when we actually paint it. I'm going to sketch this on with yellow ochre and just water. So rather than using pencil or anything else, just going to sketch it with yellow ochre. This is playing back at 3 times normal speed. So just getting that those proportions, one part for the fingers and the same part for the equivalent of the where the hand goes. And this particular hand will be a hand held in blessing. It's the thumb in, and a little bit of suggestion for where the fingernails go, and just where some of the shading will go, and well, it'll need a wrist as well. Oh, there we go. Now this time I'm going to put in the Sankhya, the shading, the under layer for the hand in blessing, and for this I am using raw umber green, and I am mixing this with egg tempera. I'm doing mixing my palette there is just a bathroom tile that I often use, and using a squirrel brush about size 5, and that's really all you need to know, because I'm just splashing this raw umber green all over the hand. So first we're going to mix up some flesh tones, and using yellow ochre and adding some egg tempera and grinding with mortar and pestle, and adding just a smidgen of Ercolano red, adding this with the brush, squirrel brush, and this is showing back at twice the normal speed. I'm going to put this mixture over most of the hand and fingers, leaving just some shady area in the underside of each of these pieces of the hand. And now we're going to decant some of that basic yellow ochre with a little bit of Ercolano red, the flesh tone, into another palette and add some titanium white. And now we're going to start to shape up, put in the fingernails, but that's about the most of the features that happen at this stage. Not going to worry about the knuckles, just the fingernails. So at that point I'm going to leave in some of the darker part for the creases and shadows in the thumb and the palm of the hand. But what we notice is that a lot of the shading is actually now lighter. That the raw umber green is too light and needs to be darkened up. So a bit more of the raw umber green just to define the edges of these fingers. We are showing this back at 4 times normal speed. Just going to add a bit of the flesh tone to that burnt umber green to blend it better. And we're going to make some more highlight. This is the next lot of highlight, and this time leaving a section so that we can see where the knuckle is. Now for another highlight, more of the base flesh tone, but more titanium white. And now virtually pure white, tiny little bits of highlight at the extremes. But I reckon that thumbnail is rubbish. So I'm going to take it out, and what we'll see is the pad of the thumb. And the thumbnail can be on the other side. And that'll look much better, I think. A couple more tips, a few traps. They seem obvious, but just check that you've put the thumb on the correct side of the hand. And count the fingers. Just saying, this is about tips and traps. There are a few ideas for drawing and painting hands. Much more could be said about the subject because hands are complex. Discuss.